Hello, everybody. Welcome. As you're joining me here, do me a favor and in the chat room, go ahead and just let me know if you can hear me okay. You can just leave me a thumbs up or let me know that you can hear. Fantastic. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate seeing you all. And before we get into this, in the chat room, also let me know where you are checking in from. I know we have Portland, Houston. Hello, Lindsay. How are you? I see you. Burnaby, Vancouver. Hi, Marshall. I see you. Wonderful. Kristen from Los Angeles. I see Scott is around here. Julia, Stella. Fantastic. Okay. Great. So everybody can hear me okay. Thanks for letting me know where you're checking in from. Second order of business, is it just me or do you also have a coffee mug with your dog or cat or pet on it? Is it just me? I think we still have a few people that are going to join us. I think we're going to have a pretty intimate group today. Because I know a lot of people had a conflict of schedules, but we're recording this session, so I'll be sending this session out later to everybody who is not just in attendance here, but who has also registered. Just to do a little housekeeping, if there's anything that comes up during the session, feel free to share in the chat. Maybe questions or just thoughts. And then towards the back end of today's talk and study group, which is the first one I'm ever doing in this format, and I'm super excited about, we can have a dialogue. And there, what we can do is we can raise our hands, and raising our hands, I will know who wants to speak. And I will give you an opportunity to unmute yourself, and then we can have a dialogue and people can listen in. The other thing I want to make sure that I'm doing here is I am staying true to the time, and I don't want to go over an hour today, as that's what we had originally agreed upon. So I'm going to make sure to stay on time and be done before the hour is up. Other than that, I am super excited to have you all here. And in the chat, I would love to hear what was it that brought you here? What was it that made you choose to show up today? It can be one word, one sentence, something short. I just want to hear where your head is at, where your heart is at, and how I can anchor the conversation in your current state of mind and intention for being here. Yeah, so in the chat, just share why you're here. My friend Rich, hello Rich, you look very comfortable there. He says curiosity. Yes, I am curious too. I'm very curious. What else do we have? Good morning, here to learn. Hi Ellie, I see you. I love having a couple of familiar faces around. Some of you guys I am not familiar with, but maybe we have met in person. If there's anyone here that I have met in person before, because you've attended one of my seminars, please let me know. Oh, my friend Iñaki is here, willing to learn from different perspectives. Fantastic. Improving understanding and coaching of movement mechanics. Yes, that's one of the reasons I'm here too. Yago, hello, freestyle vibe. That's exactly right. Yeah, and to kind of piggyback off of that, freestyle vibe. This is a freestyle vibe, and I'll tell you why it's a freestyle vibe. Well, because I have decided that this session in particular, to not prepare too much. Meaning I don't have a lot of notes. I have my book, but I'm just going to go off of what's on my heart right now and what I think is relevant to speak of today as a starting point for what freestyle the study group, which is a complete temporary name, but it could become something. And to just allow for whatever is coming up for me to flow, and to give you the space and the opportunity to reflect back to me in a way that allows us to translate the information that's going to be shared into something that is of value to you, something that you can apply to your practice and to that which brings you here. So I think we're almost here now. Everybody seems to be ready to go. We have a few more comments in the chat. Let's see what you guys are saying. Lindsay says, love hearing your presentations. Thank you very much. I met you in Houston at the seminar, and you were my coach one time when I dropped in at SFCF in 2011. Very cool. That's when we were in the parking lot. My friend Caitlin is here. She says, learn and add perspective applying across areas. And Andre says, what kind of flexibility approach do you recommend alongside the freestyle method? That is a very good question. I think there are a lot of very good stretching coaches out there, and flexibility methods, mobility methods, and we can talk about those, of course. I guess confession, I am not very flexible, but I am able to appear to be flexible in the way that I move. And this is something that is extremely important, actually, in the conversation that we're going to be having, because sometimes what we believe to see, look like, address, even judge as high-level performance is just an illusion of a reality. And there are a lot of individuals, a lot of practices that are really good at masking, hiding that which is a weakness and presenting that which looks like a strength and supposedly can translate. And I'll tell you just a personal story from me coming from the world of gymnastics, which is that in gymnastics, especially for men, you have 6 events. For women, you have 4. There's a code of points that you follow. There's a book that tells you what elements to learn, and then the value of those elements, meaning the points that you get from doing those, and then how to execute them in a way that you don't lose points, and thus can get the highest number of points possible in a competition, and arrive at the goal or the finish line that you want to arrive at, which is the top of the podium, aka winning. And in the process of playing a game limited by a book, one will always be masking, hiding weaknesses, and play by the rules of the game solely in order to get to the goal. And this, although it is totally legitimate, very powerful, and is something that we all do to some degree, whether it's in our physical practice, in our sport, at work, and family. We're always trying to be efficient, effective. We're always trying to meet the standard, arrive at the goal. We lose the awareness and relationship with that which we are hiding. And one of my goals with freestyle, and why we're doing this, is to bring not our weaknesses necessarily to the surface, but bring that which we have forgotten to the surface. And that's really why I'm doing this. And to formally kick this first freestyle study group off, I thought I would share what catalyzed the idea for doing it, which was the following. I thought to myself, it's interesting that I receive almost daily messages from people asking me questions about the book specifically. And the questions being relatively simple to answer, but that have and carry so much more information. And in addressing these questions, I sense that people get the idea, they go about their lives, and then they disappear, and I know nothing about them. And thinking about this, I thought, it's interesting that nobody usually challenges that which I wrote in the book, which may mean one of 2 things. One, I'm a genius and I put out this perfect book that is just ready to go, or two, that not enough people have not only read it, but actually tried to put it into practice and been willing to challenge that which I address in the book. It is very clear that I'm not a genius. What is clear is that we have not stress tested the material enough. And I am opening up a channel of dialogue where people who are in the fitness industry or who are coaches or who care about having a physical practice and are willing to increase their awareness and why we move the way we move, how we have arrived at this place and where we are going, to challenge that and to not allow someone like myself to claim that they have arrived at certain results and those results are the right way. So if you are willing to participate in a conversation like that, just in the chat, just say, I am willing. So this makes me excited. For many years, I have presented myself as someone who has the answers. Someone who is a subject matter expert, they call it. Someone who knows what is right and what is wrong. Someone who on paper and maybe out in the world has done things that seem like they come from a place of righteousness. And that's not the case. The truth is, I am simply a guy trying to figure it out, and I have been fortunate enough to be in the right place at the right time around the right people with the right knowledge. But most of all, I've been in a place where I've been willing, I've been open to try and open to want to make change. And one of the biggest lessons I've learned is that the change that one wants to see doesn't just have to be modeled by oneself, but also has to be mirrored. It has to be mirrored by those who are surrounding them. And sometimes what we see in the mirror doesn't look or feel as good as we may thought it would feel like. And that's where I want to go. I want to go to a place where we can look in the mirror, every single one of us, myself included, see something that feels a little uncomfortable and take that and make it the anchor and catalyst for change, and to learn how to love that. And I believe that in the book Freestyle, I attempted to address this from a physical perspective. And I'm curious here, out of everybody who is in attendance right now, how many of you guys, and tell me the honest truth, how many of you guys have read the book cover to cover, every single page? Raise your hand. Raise your hand in the chat, or just say, I have. Okay, Corbin says, not me. Cover to cover. Andre says, nope. Marshall says, no, I have not read it. Thank you for your honesty. I appreciate it. Just got it yesterday. That's right. Cover to cover, not me. Exactly. Not even my mother has read the book cover to cover, of course, because this is not necessarily a book that you have to read cover to cover. This is a manual. This is a guide. And it's important that we realize that a manual is something that we use as a reference. And what I want to do is I want to use today as a reference for what is possible to see come out of this in the future. Now, if you have not read the book at all, you just got it yesterday, or you haven't read it cover to cover, I want to address really quickly what the book is really a product of. And it's the product of everything that I've done physically and have learned since the day I was born in 1982 until 2013. That's what the book is. It's a combined library of knowledge that I've accumulated, in addition to an attempt, and this is what the book is anchored in, an attempt at trying to answer the questions that I was seeing arising in the fitness industry and later in the CrossFit space. And not just trying to answer the questions that were being asked, but also presenting new questions that allowed for us to move the needle a little bit more. And one of the things that I noticed during my coaching in the CrossFit space especially is that people struggled to ask the right questions being the questions that would lead to the answers that would give them the awareness, the visibility of how, when to take the next steps. And that's something that I want to arrive at today. The other thing I want to say about the book is that if you look at the book, besides the design and everything, there's an architecture to the book. And I don't know if you guys can see here, but you see that there are 3 tabs. There's this little green tab right here, the red tab, and this little black tab. These little tabs indicate the 3 parts of the book that are very important. Part number 1, which is that first little tab at the top, that one indicates the framework, the essence of what freestyle is, where it came from, and where it should be going if we all engage with it in a way that is not just dogmatic, but expressive in our individual practices and with the awareness of what could happen collectively. The second tab, this one right here, the red one, that's the thickest one, that's the meat and potatoes of the book. That's where I present 4 movements. Now, I want to admit that the subtitle of this book, Maximizing Sport and Life Performance with 4 Basic Movements, is kind of clickbaity. We all know this. This is kind of bullshit. So just know that that is purely marketing, and it kind of bothers me just to think about it, but there's a reason for it. First of all, maximizing, what is maximizing? Maximizing is simply being able to move towards one's potential. Thus, in the book, one of my goals is to define the potential. And every single person who is here, from a movement perspective, I think it's extremely important that we can define what is potential, and that we can not only define it from our perspective, but rather from the place of what would it look like to mirror potential to somebody else. What would it look like if I presented potential to a client, to a person that I'm working with, or to myself? What is it that we're really mirroring? What would we like for people to see? So I want you to notice that the word maximizing, that's what it stands for. Not just potential, but the act of mirroring. Sport and life. Now, sport and life is important to address because sport is where there are rules, regulations, there are standards to be met, which is different than life that has also rules, regulations, and standards, but most is undiscovered, unexplored. This is why we have science. This is why we have the expression of curiosity, because we know there's so much more out there. This is why there is a spiritual path that people follow and are constantly seeking to reveal the truth. So it's extremely important that we can see that maximizing is seeing the potential, mirroring that in a way where we play a game, but also in a way where we can see that the game is so small and there's so much space to grow that it can almost be a little frightening. And that sense of being a little frightened, being the catalyst for seeing the opportunity ahead, realizing that the fear is actually bringing up the need for expression, the need for growth, the need for unfolding. The word performance, what does that mean? Performance means how we are expressing ourselves. And performance, if you have ever listened to me before, you know that I've always addressed performance from a place of feelings, emotions. And I say the following: true human performance is measured by feel. When it feels right in your head and your heart and your gut, then you're trending in the right direction. If you continue to unfold in that direction over time, the numbers will follow, the results will follow. But unless you do that, you won't see the numbers and you won't be able to stress test that. In other words, performance is something that has to be experienced and understood logically only in retrospect. We only understood what we did before. And this is extremely important. And this is why I want to have a conversation about this, because when it comes to physical performance, which is our ability to navigate this vehicle that we have, it requires way more than following a prescription, steps 1, 2, 3. It requires us to participate, to adapt, to adhere to those steps in a way that it's revealing who we are and allowing us to not only follow that line, but also change it, redirect it, and realize that there's so much more to practice than just doing. Now, the 4 basic movements, they came from the questions that were being asked, especially in the CrossFit space, where people were struggling to do a pistol, people were struggling with handstand push-ups, people were struggling with a muscle up, and then people dreaded, for example, doing burpees. And this may seem very superficial and mundane, but I want you to think about it this way. The pistols is squatting mechanics. It's using our lower body. And not only squatting with 2 legs, but also taking it to a one-legged position, which is what you see in a pistol, that translates into locomotion, walking, running, changing directions. Not just that, throwing, catching, spinning, turning, athletic performance, as some people in the field call it, or simply the complexity that we can create by rotating or having contralateral movements. If I say anything that's too geeked out, just call me out in the chat and say, hey guys, we're not playing that game. We're just playing the common language. Now, handstand push-up. Why handstand push-up? Well, handstand push-up is an expression of pushing mechanics with the upper body. And coming from a gymnastics background, a handstand is always something that's exciting. And it's something that in CrossFit, especially around 2010, became really apparent that the top performers were struggling with. So why not address something that seems so far-fetched and make it so accessible that it almost seems ridiculous in retrospect? And within these movements, the squat and the push-up, being able to present principles and values that are transferable to something else. Then the muscle up being, once again, upper body pulling mechanics. And when seen in a kipping fashion, whether you agree with that style or not, it doesn't matter. Noticing that it is engaging the lower body. And how is it engaging the lower body? Well, it's engaging the lower body from a pulling perspective. If you think about regular squatting as the act of pulling yourself down and then pushing yourself out of the hole, in the muscle up, what you're really doing during the transition is you're pulling with your legs. So you're practicing pulling mechanics with the squat. And that, if you think about locomotion as addressed in the pistol unilateral movements, it's something that you have to do every time you take a step. You have to pick your leg up. You have to pull your leg up. And there's some very interesting principles that I present in the book where I address that pulling mechanics is the mere act of setting ourselves up for the next push. And the push being the first movement expression that we perform in not only developing progressions, but adapting. And then finally, the burpee. The burpee came into play when someone at a seminar that I taught in London in 2010 brought up to me and said, Carl, why don't you teach the burpee? And I said, well, the burpee is too simple for a cool guy like myself to teach. Why would I do something like that? And she said, well, isn't there something about getting up and getting down that is very important? We do it every morning, we do it every night. And I thought to myself, yeah, I think that is important, but isn't that too obvious? And she said to me, what seems most obvious is usually the most important. She was an evolutionary biologist. I respect her very much. And ever since, I made sure to always think about the most mundane things as the most important ones. And that's where another quote that you may read in the book, which is, in order to advance, we must learn how to master the basics. And the basics is where the conversation has to be. And my goal is always to make the basics exciting, to make the basics cool, to make the basics transferable, to make us realize that everything that we take for granted is the gift, is the practice that we must return to. And if we can simply do that, we will be moving the needle. And in moving the needle, we're not only changing ourselves, not only changing our clients, but we're making a massive impact across the board and around the world. And that is always the goal. And that's why I chose those 4 movements. Finally, the word freestyle was just something that I was excited about, because when I broke out of the rigidity that existed in gymnastics, I realized that I was free. I was free to break the rules and the code, and that there was more than one way of doing things. There was more than just the gymnastics way. And that was a very liberating moment for me, because I realized that there was more, that this journey that we were on, whether it was life or the practice of a sport, had more to it. And that as long as I was curious to see that, as long as I was open to accept that, then I could evolve closer to my potential, regardless of me being able to define it. And that is the essence of what freestyle is. And the reason it's presented as free plus style is simply an aesthetic reason at first, which this is called Swiss design. I don't know if you guys can see this flipped or if it's showing properly on your screen. On my screen, it's mirrored. But the plus sign there is not just a Swiss design element, but it also allows us to showcase the 2 big values. First, freedom, and the second, style. Freedom being the exercise of ultimate responsibility as human being. Freedom is not just letting go and avoiding. Freedom is the act of observing. Freedom is the act of exercising full responsibility, processing the information that we're seeing, that we're experiencing, and then translating it, and choosing, whether you believe in free will or not, choosing to act upon it. And style being the way that you, I, us as individuals are expressing ourselves, and most important, how that expression is in alignment with other people, with other ways. And when seeing that we get to a point where the alignment seems to break down, where there seems to be contrast, where there seems to be a contradiction, a paradox, to realize that that's where the meaning of our unique style lives, and the reflection of our potential is mirrored. That's what freestyle is, and that's why I'm excited for this, because I think this is where we really take it to the next level. And now, from a very technical perspective, the way that one uses this manual is by choosing where to start. And sometimes that may be something as simple as a word. Maybe you're looking for information about grip. You can go to the back of the book. You can look up the letter G in the index. And once you find it, you'll find the word that you're looking for. You're looking for grip. Okay, and the book, it says right now, grips, page 360. You can go to page 360 and you can start reading right there. And the beauty of this is that if you start reading on page 360, as soon as you start reading, on the second line already, it says, check chapter 1, page 40. So you can continue to read about grip here specifically, but it's referencing you back to chapter 1. It's saying, hey, go to page 40 and check that out. See what I'm talking about over there. And when you go to page 40, you'll experience the same thing. And slowly what ends up happening is that you will be choosing your own adventure. It will be guiding you where you need to go according to where you are curious. So know that the book is also designed from an a place of architecture where there's a structure dedicated to helping you navigate the waters the way that you need to in this very moment. And that's what the book is, and that's why this is important. And I'm going to show you guys something. I have this key. Do you guys see this? This is a key. It's a rusty key that has yet to be finished. It's an old key. This key, I picked this up at a key factory in Sweden that burned down almost 30 years ago now, I believe. And as you can see, this is a very old key, and it's not finished, but this is exactly who I think we are. We are like this key, yet to be carved out, yet to have the code, the teeth marked, yet to have a lock to open up the new space that we're trying to enter. And this key to me is a reminder of that we're constantly in this place. We're constantly living here. And this book is supposed to be a tool to help you become not just this key in the rough, but the potential of this key, and to realize that you get to choose what lock it opens. And that's what's exciting about this whole process. And we're gonna do it through a discussion around physical performance, what we can observe. It can't get easier than that. It can't get more obvious than that. And that's how simple I want to keep it. Now, if anybody has any questions or any concerns before I get into today's material, please comment in the chat. Let me know if you have any thoughts, anything that's coming up for you. I would like to address it. If not, I'm just going to go over to page 66, which if you have the book, feel free to go to that page. And you'll see that on that page, I address and talk about progression. And on this page, you see me spotting Jason Khalipa, who, if you don't know who Jason Khalipa is, he's one of the original CrossFit sport or CrossFit athletes that won the games in 2008. I'm spotting him on a backflip. And this image has some importance because it's from a video I made a long time ago, addressing how learning how to do a movement like the backflip that for some may seem so far out and so far-fetched can be built by using very simple movements. In this case, it was jumping and landing. That's the beginning and the end. We have 66% of the parts. And then knees to elbows or knees through elbows, which leads to a backwards roll. And that being the transition, the middle part. And by addressing the movement from a start, a middle, and a finish, we can start to develop any movement pattern. And as long as one has the beginning, has the end, one can start working on the middle. And the way that I presented it in the video, which of course is controversial, it was meant to be that way, was I said, let's do this for time. In many ways, I was catering to the ever increasing impatience that exists in us as practitioners or in some of the people that we serve as coaches or teachers. And in addressing it that way, allowing people to get a little bit excited, feel like there are possibilities, and then within that excitement, be able to now pack in the true punch, the lesson. It looks simple, but it's not easy. Moving towards ease is what having the structure allows us to do, and that being the essence of progression. The other thing I address here in this chapter, if you look at the first quote, I say the best progression will ramp up the most novice and challenge the most advanced. One of the things that I kept hearing, I was thinking about hurrying as the impatience was coming into my body. One of the things I kept hearing back in the day was that it's important that we develop inclusive practices. And I thought, okay, inclusive practices, what does this mean? Well, at first, my young mind thought, does this mean that physical performance has to be presented in a limited fashion because not all individuals will be able to arrive at high levels of performance, such as the performances that we see at the Olympics? Is that the case? Do we have to limit ourselves? And as time went on, I realized that that was not it, because it wasn't the expression itself of a movement, of a physical pattern, but rather the essence behind it. It was being able to adapt any movement to any context, to any individual, and to accept and respect it as valid because it's moving the needle for that person right there. And if it's moving the needle for that person, then it's moving the needle for everybody. Something that really made this relevant for me was working with individuals who were in the adaptive category. In other words, there were people who had suffered some kind of injury, maybe had fractured their spine and were paralyzed from the hips down, from the chest down, and could only access certain parts of their body. And realizing that we could develop the same motor patterns a high level elite Olympic athlete could, but just expressing it slightly different. And that being the essence of developing progressions. The other thing that became really clear was that if I was to be an inclusive practitioner, an inclusive coach, I had to begin to see regression as progression. What looks like going backwards is actually going forward. What looks like pulling back is actually the thing that sends me where I want to go. And this is where I realized that the language that we use, the conversation that we're having, was extremely important. And this is when I started thinking about, how do I develop a progression, a roadmap that will help the most novice individual, the person with the least experience, to ramp up quickly, safely, effectively, and efficiently, and yet with the same exact progression, be able to challenge the most advanced athletes. This is something that I was able to experiment with, and I have some pretty good case studies with, when I was working, for example, with my mom or my dad, and I compared the progressions I was using with them versus the progressions I was using with someone like Annie Thorisdottir, who ended up becoming the first woman to win the CrossFit Games twice. And I was, of course, honored to be able to be part of her coaching team. And to see that we were doing exactly the same practice. The difference was that when we overlapped the practice with the individual itself, the conversation, the relationship, the transaction was what had to be changed. And that's why this book is first and foremost a book about not linguistics, but rather communication and relationships. Our relationship with each other, our relationship with a practice, a relationship with a goal and outcome, a potential, what we seek to maximize, and that being the anchor of everything that we talk about. Now, in this chapter of progression, which if you have read it or not, you know that I talk about 3 progression types. 1, a natural progression. 2, a creative progression. And 3, a formal progression. Now, the order that I follow usually is the following. It's natural, formal, creative. It doesn't matter what order you address them in. The reason I address them from that order is because I believe that when we can see them in that order, we can create a full cycle. What do I mean by this? Well, I want us to think about a natural progression. And a natural progression being the act of learning, seeing an evolution of a movement pattern without any direction, without any formal teaching or input. What does this mean? This means the following. I want you to imagine someone who has never done any Olympic weightlifting, for example, being presented with a barbell and a few weights, and telling that person to learn how to pick that up and place it over their head with their arms straight, and just giving them that as an outcome, and then leaving that up to their own devices without having access to YouTube tutorials, to books, to other teachers, just them engaging with the barbell, trying to have the outcome that we addressed, which was have the weights over your head or the barbell over your head with your arms straight. And then returning back to see the evolution of this person and realizing that they have adapted and picking up that barbell maybe into something that looks like a clean or looks like a jerk or looks like a snatch or a combination of all three of those. That would be a natural progression. Now I want you to imagine that there's not only one individual practicing, trying to pick up those weights overhead, but rather we have thousands, millions of individuals. So we have a pool of individuals naturally adapting into a task. Reminder, anything that we talk about in fitness nowadays, everybody brings in the concept of functional fitness. Functional fitness being the task-dependent performance or practice. I just want that to be a reminder, so have that be an aside. Now, I want you to imagine these thousands of people, these millions of people practicing lifting up the barbell. If over time we see an evolution, they complete the task, we will probably see a few people who did it faster, did it better, look good, have no injuries, no pain, and with all of those have adapted into a way of performing that movement that we would consider effective, efficient, proficient, and thus taking some of the inflection points in their adaptation, some points of performance, and translating them into a method, into a practice, and thus entering the formal progression, the place where now I come in as a teacher, I have my little book, I know how to do the technique, and I can tell the individual, we're not just going to bring this barbell overhead, but we're going to do it in two different ways. We're going to practice a clean and jerk. We're going to practice a snatch. The clean and jerk is practiced like this, the snatch like this. Here are some things that I want you to know, and now let's drill. What happens with formal progressions? Well, with formal progressions, what we see is we see the speed in which we adapt increase. It increases. This means that we can get stuff done quicker. Now, that's not necessarily good, okay? It's just simply a fact. And I want us to just stay at that factual level just for a second. But now things may change. Maybe we get to the point where the barbell used to perform these movements no longer looks like an official Olympic weightlifting barbell. Maybe it looks like a thicker bar. Maybe it looks like a strongman bar. And now the way that we're gripping the bar is changing. There is no wrap of the thumb around the bar. The thumb goes over. There is no hook grip being addressed. Maybe there is a mixed grip, which is causing something to change. Maybe during a transition point, there's a little bit of a rounding of the back. Maybe there is a muting of the hips aren't going back. There is a change in the expression. And maybe it was simply because at that point in time, there were no Olympic weightlifting bars left. We only had these thicker bars or a piece of wood. And now the adaptation has changed. Maybe it is because one was curious to see if that movement translated, that formal progression translated into something that was a little bit different. I was recently, here's an example, I was recently in Lake Tahoe, and we went paddleboarding. And as we were paddleboarding, we decided to just hang out for a little bit. And as we were hanging out, of course, people started getting ants in their pants. And some people decided to practice their overhead squat with the paddle on the paddleboard. You've seen this on Instagram. Everybody who's practiced CrossFit and has been paddleboarding has done that before. And it's funny to see, just because people are curious to see if they can translate a skill that they have formally learned into a different environment. What happens? The expression of that movement slightly changes. Maybe they have to go a little wider with their hands. Maybe they have to roll their shoulders a little bit more. Maybe they have to go a little more knock-kneed, or the knees have to come in a little bit. Maybe they have to turn their toes out more. Maybe all of a sudden, because the board doesn't allow them to go too wide, they have to round their back a little bit. Things start to change. That is part of the creative expression. And an example of this, where we've seen this, for example, in my curiosities, has been gymnastics versus breakdancing. In gymnastics, we have certain elements. Breakdancing took some of those elements. For example, a flare, which is something you've probably seen people do on the pommel horse. They go with their legs open and they spin around. The breakdancer took that and said, instead of doing it with my arms, I'm going to do it on the ground. So I'm going to put my back on the ground and I'm going to spin on the ground as I turn around with my legs spinning like this. In the year 2000, a gymnast by the name of Alexei Nemov thought that was so cool. He thought, you know what, I'm going to integrate that element into gymnastics. And he brought it into gymnastics. And then all of a sudden in gymnastics, we were practicing what creatively was progressed in the world of breakdancing. In other words, a creative expression that happened naturally, by the way, was integrated into the formal way of doing things, into the code of points of a sport. And this has happened over and over again with different movements. Another one is the air flare, which is a windmill that looks like this with your arms straight and then doing like a little flip behind your back. And this is what is natural in progress, but creative in its exploration and formalized in order for us to be able to engage with one another. These three types of progressions are extremely important to bring up, because if you have a practice and you are a coach and you are working with individuals and you're programming for them and you're giving the exact steps, you are doing the right thing. You are guiding them into the right places. Know that. But if we are avoiding creating space for the individual to become autonomous or to have space for their own creativity of practice, their own exploration, then we are limiting their ability not just to adhere to your program that you're prescribing, but to meeting the needs that they have in the world. And an example of this is what I believe a coach is. A coach being someone who is assisting others in learning how they can get their needs met. This is very important. A coach is one who is in assistance to others in them, not the coach, them learning how to get their needs met. This means that, first of all, they need to identify their needs. Some of them know them, but most of them have not spent enough time in the creative realm to even address what goes beyond my immediate needs that actually are desires right now. In addition to that, what are the skills, techniques, methods? What are the things that we have to do to get those needs met? In addition to that is, do I have the actual method skills to fully assist that person in getting their needs met? Most likely not. And this is the downfall of us as coaches, is when we believe that we have arrived at a place where we know something. This is when we think that we have the solutions to the problems to this person, when in reality, the solutions to their problems are in themselves. So I bring these three types of progressions up because I would like to, one, challenge you to see if you actually are allowing yourself to see what a natural progression looks like. Just think about your practice, the way that you do things. Are you following a formal way of doing things? And if so, within that formality, are you allowing yourself to deviate from what is said to be right to create something new, to address it in your way, your style? Are you allowing yourself to be free? Are you exercising the responsibility that it takes to actually deviate from the plan, and then be able to come back to the plan and make it stronger? This happens in medicine all the time, and I believe Ellie can attest to this, is that medicine is the teaching of science with the intention of doing one thing: healing. We are trying to heal, and we need to address what is healing. What does that look like? And if we can't address that over and over and over again, then we will become stagnant, we will plateau, and then the game is really over. And that's, once again, why I want to do this freestyle study group, because I believe that we can do better. And I can't do it alone, of course. And I believe that even in this group right here, there's so much more knowledge combined amongst us than I have on my own, that I would like to, one, direct towards your practice yourself, two, direct towards what I'm speaking of in order to challenge what maybe I have believed to be true up until now. And ultimately, with the intention of having this transcend into all other physical practices, and thus mental, emotional practices as well, and other skills outside of the realm of fitness per se. We are approaching the hour now. We have 8 minutes left. Today, as you can tell, was a little bit more of a show and tell, and very little lecture, more just highlighting some things, which in that case was progressions. But I would like to, in the future, make it so that this freestyle study group could be a place where we agree upon working together for a certain period of time, where there is one, reading, journaling, writing, then coming to a session like this, discussing, presenting, and then taking that and putting it into practice, and then coming back to new conclusions, and those conclusions potentially leading you, myself, all of us to a greater level of understanding. Now, that's something that I'm currently working on. So if this is something that you're interested in, once the session is done, email me. You can email me, carl@freestyleconnection.com. And I'll begin to put a little group together that we can start to work on this if interested. And the way that it's going to work, I'm not sure yet. I wanted to see what happened here today with you, and just go from there. So know that I'm also freestyling what this study group is. Okay. But I think the intention is clear, and maybe some of what I shared with you here today resonates. Now, any questions, anything that came up for you, anything that you would like to talk about right now with the last couple minutes that we have, feel free to raise your hand. If you just want to say hello, you can also do that. And Ellie, feel free to unmute yourself, and let's have a chat.
Hey, how's it going, everybody?
Good.
I was curious, a couple of things came up. One, with what you're wanting to test. So basically it sounds like, you're like, okay, here's what I've discovered, here's what I've spent so much time defining and giving words to in this process. And so the test, and so I'm thinking of it scientifically, like, all right, you're wanting to, see if this is something that can hold up to repetition, and, can you repeat the test, basically? Which parts are you thinking in your mind that you're wanting to test?
Well, that's a great question, Ellie. And I think what it is, it's taking principles that I present in the book and applying them to the individual's practice. So let's say you're learning how to do a muscle up, or you're practicing hand balancing, or you're someone who is an orthopedic surgeon. to take these principles and to present them in a way where we have an idea of what they can produce, and then to see what they actually look like in practice. So it's getting some field testing, so to speak. And in the book presents movement patterns that we can use as examples for that. But the goal is to take those examples and actually create new ones that are completely yours, so to speak, that they are of your interest, they are part of your practice, the things that you are working on.
Thanks. And the one other thought that I had was, and I've gone through this is coming from my personal reaction, but you said initially, you're like, people always like ask questions and then it's like dead silence, you know. It's not like they keep coming back and say, Carl, you're wrong, you know, this is not working, this is just not possible. And I'm thinking I think there are a couple of different reasons, at least that came to my mind. Was number one, and I've told you this over and over the years, I guess, that you have a way of describing things, number one, that is so detailed, and so detailed is the best word for it, that most of us aren't, either we haven't given it the time to give it that much thought in that much detail, or we hear it in so much detail and we're still trying to digest it like years later. So, I mean, I think it can actually be a little intimidating to be like, all right, no, you're wrong. Like, just like if I were to hear about a new procedure, I wouldn't tell the person describing it to me, no, you're wrong, that can't work, because that's not the way I think. I think like, all right, maybe this is true, let's try it.
Yeah, 100%. And I appreciate that very much, Ellie. And that's something I actually put a lot of effort into trying to explain things in a way that you can really see it from different perspectives and different angles. And I understand that it can be something that people struggle to process. I believe we can upgrade our processing software. And that's one of the things that I want to do. I want to make us a little bit sharper, a little bit braver, a little bit more courageous, a little bit more willing to operate outside the box, so we can get enough feedback and test enough that it can show us a little bit more, or give us a little bit more clarity on what is true or not, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Cool. Does that answer your question a little bit, yeah. Ellie, or your comment? Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Andre, feel free to share what's on your mind. Unmute yourself and talk to us.
Yes, hello. Yeah, my experience was as well when I bought this back in 2015. I think I didn't really understand how much it took from me as I now do, because now I see it as a process of reading, trying to understand it, and as how I understand it, try to apply it, and then back again, and having that. But it takes so much more of you, especially your way and your method of viewing it. Not letting go of what you know, but test it piece by piece and integrate it within yourself. And it takes a lot of challenging yourself in that. And if you just go as another kind of fitness, do this, do that, as I did back in 2015, it was much harder. Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense to me. Thank you for sharing that. And I think this is where there are 4 parts to all this. So if let's say we were to run a full study group test, it would be first one of expression. So I would express to you some of the thoughts and principles that I have in the book. You would express them back to me. Then we would go into the second stage. The second stage would be the one of experimentation. Let's say now we go into the field and we start to experiment. What works, what doesn't work, what have I come to see to be true? And then once we have all the tests done and we've done all the experiments, then we can integrate that into our practice. We are going from what would be a natural progression of expression and experimentation into a formal progression. And then once we've integrated, that's when over time, what we will be practicing is in killing that. In other words, it's in not allowing that to become dogmatic, but to always challenging it. And that would be the stage of transcendence. In other ways, what you can do is you can see it as skill transfer. It's the application of principles, values into everything else. So I'm glad that that's the case for you, Andre, and I would like to yeah, make that possible for everybody going forward. We are on the hour. We've gone over here now. I believe we're over 2 minutes. If anybody has any questions, anybody is, as I said, interested in continuing this conversation, please email me, carl@freestyleconnection.com. I will be sending out this recording so you can review it if you want. And other than that, I just wanted to thank every single one of you who is here attending today. You guys are awesome. I really appreciate you taking the time and being willing to participate. It means a lot to me. And I would like to be able to continue this going forward. So thank you. Yeah, I'm just looking at you guys here on my screen. I see all the faces. Who's here? Marshall is here still. Andre, Iñaki, I see you. Corbin, Ellie, Lindsay, Caitlin, Zach. Who else? Rich is here. Awesome. Scott, everybody, thank you for being here. I appreciate you, and I look forward to seeing you soon again, okay? All right. Take care, everybody. Let's do the awkward wave that everybody does on Zoom. See you guys.